Okay, so as Etude requested in GDL, here is a breakdown, deconstruction of Helios, the weird 7/8 neuro thing that I posted yesterday. Apologies in advance for the bad mic quality. I do have a good mic, but I can't find the cable for it, so you're stuck with the laptop's mic. And I also apologize for any background noise. There are two cats, and they like to run around and whine at me. Anyway, so I'll start by talking about the inspirations and influences for this track briefly. So there's a couple of inspirations. One being a musician by the name of False Noise. He does sort of slightly experimental neuro kind of music. He's one of my favorite artists at the moment. I've been listening to a lot of his stuff. You can find all his stuff on Spotify. Definitely recommend checking him out if you all like this. He has a track called Hallucinate, which is in 7/8, which was one of the inspirations for doing neuro in 7/8, and also he just generally does a lot of weird glitchy stuff. The other inspiration was with this melody, this little bell melody. So this little bell melody was kind of stolen from an Andrew Huang video. If you don't know who Andrew Huang is, he's a music YouTuber. He does a lot of weird stuff with samples, and he recently went to an old abandoned military hangar in Germany and recorded some really reverby sounds. And one of the things he did was this little 7/8 bell melody, which was this, but in C major rather than D sharp minor. So I took it, I changed it to D sharp minor, the reason I changed it to D sharp is because neuro stuff usually wants to be around F sharp. It sounded weird going that high, so I just went to D sharp, and then I went to minor because neuro is usually not happy and upbeat. The actual synth, moving on to layering, I'll talk about this synth first because it was the first layering I did in this project. So it's two different patches basically. One is just a cowbell. It's just a sample that I found in one of my sample packs. It's like the first cowbell sample from Black Octopus Leviathan Sounds. I'm gonna recommend a lot of things in this little video, so take that with a pinch of salt. But seriously, Leviathan is a must-have in my opinion. It's like $99 and it's almost always on sale, so definitely get it if you have disposable income. But yeah, the dry cowbell, where is it? Percussions, world percussions. Sounds like this. Right, and then there's that bell on top of it, so so the cowbell, I had to pitch it around a little to get it to work right. I think I've got the root note as F because that's what it's in. Well, that's an F. So the cowbell sounds like this. That is compressed to fuck. Like it's hard ceilinged here pretty much, mostly because I didn't want too much transient on it. If I get rid of that, it has too much of a transient, so that lowers the transient a bit and brings up the sort of tail a little. There's also an EQ on it, which is kind of a high pass with a focus on 900 Hz and like 8000 Hz. Without that, there's a lot of weird low noise, and that helps emphasize the sort of melodic, the tonal aspect of it. And then there's just some reverb, which Valhalla Room is my go-to for reverb. I used to use Fruit Reverb 2, but it has a weird sort of metallic sound to it. Valhalla Room is $50. It's the second best VST I ever bought. The best being Serum. So yeah, that's the cowbell. The other element is this synth pluck, which is just 3x oscillator. Comes default with FL Studio. It's just a basic 3 oscillator synth. So I have a sine wave on like just the regular bass semitone, and I have another sine wave that's semitone down, and I have a square wave that's really quiet that's semitone down as well. So that also has some EQ on it. It's got like a high pass with a slight bump at sort of 800 Hz. Again, that has weird low end stuff without that. And then yeah, that's also got reverb. That also has some stuff in the envelope here as well. Yeah, it's got like a pluck here. So this is just a volume envelope. It's got no attack, but it's got like a bit of decay and release. and this is on the. This doesn't really do much actually, but this is the low pass cutoff envelope. It's probably not doing anything because the volume probably fades out long before that matters. But yeah, whatever, it's there. And so yeah, you've got, and when you lay them together, you get a pretty good bell sound. So that was the first thing I made in this track. It's obviously in 7/8. It's essentially just 7 notes replayed over and over, which fits into 7/8. And then obviously from that I had a tempo, a time signature. Well, really I went into it with a tempo and a time signature, but you know, and I had a key, D sharp minor. So then I went into Leviathan again, and I went to the atmospheric effects. Now there aren't any D sharp atmospheres. So I took a D atmosphere called Motion and pitched it up a semitone. I won't play the whole thing, but that's this part, and that's basically the pads that are in the background of the entire track. I did mention that this track is mostly samples. I hold true to that. It is mostly samples. So yeah, this is sort of the pads that played in the background of the entire track. It's been cut up so that it doesn't fade in too much and stuff. So next I'll move on to the actual start. This is the squishy drum that everyone keeps talking about. So there's a lot of things to go over here. So let's start with the kick. It's a kick. It's actually cut up from a drum loop. This is a drum loop I like to use. It's a D&B drum loop from a pack I found on Splice. Splice is another thing I recommend. You pay monthly, there are different tiers, and based on the tier you pick, you get a certain amount of credits every month. It's like 100, 300, or 500, I think. 1 credit is 1 sample. You can go into any sample pack, you can buy individual samples, or you can buy the whole sample pack if you've got enough credits. So it's really useful for finding samples you want. It's got a pretty good search system as well, and also the rent-to-own system where you pay monthly for a. Basically, you still pay the full price for a VST, but you pay that price split over several months. Like Serum is $10 a month for 19 months instead of $190. Rent-to-own is probably one of the best things that happened to like electronic music production. I'm a little disappointed that Native Instruments are like the only major plugin developer that are completely ignoring rent-to-own, but it is what it is. Anyway, so this particular thing is from this Drum and Bass 2 sample pack. Very generic name, but it's this. So it's just a kick and snare loop with little hi-hats before, after each snare and after each beat and before some of the snares. I haven't modified that at all, but all I did was just obviously crop that down to just the kick. I am using the same snare as well, but that's its own thing. It's here. Yeah, so that's my kick and snare. No modifications. It's got the kicks on a mixer track, but that's just for sidechain. It's not being used for. There's no effects or anything. The snare is not on a mixer track at all. So there's no effects or anything. That's just dry as is. So that's the kick. Then there's also this second. There's a B version of that drum loop, which sounds like this. Wait for it. Now, if you listen closer to that second snare, there's a little click right before the second snare. You can't hear it before the first one because there's a kick before the first one, but listen to the second snare, listen just before it. It's that little click right before it. I took that, and that's right here. And so that plays before the kick like this. Also, there's a top loop that goes with this loop, which is this. So there's basically 2 sounds in this entire loop. But if you listen to this first bit, that's the entire loop. It's just that repeated 4 times. So what that is there's let's grab this. So you've got this little, so this tiny little click that then leads into a reverse hi-hat that leads into a hi-hat. And then this, I love this. This is the first half of an amen break, high passed. It just works really well. And I just use those 2 sounds. So here I've used the sort of reverse hi-hat thing and the actual hi-hat. as part of the like squishy drums. So let me just move this out of the way so we can play around with this properly. So that's the click, the hi-hat, and the kick. Next up we've got this. This is a little sample from the where is it? It's from the short FX section of Black Ops Leviathan. It's just this. Then I shortened it to this. Then normalized it and added some fade out. Again, other than that, there's no mixing on it, and so that just adds a little crunch to it. And so altogether, it's so that adds quite a lot to it. Then there's two crashes. There's one full crash, and then there's one crash that I cropped down to half bar, which basically makes it more of an open hi-hat, I guess. But if you listen to it in context, it works pretty well. There's also an impact, which the impact's got quite a bit of bass, but I didn't bother sidechaining it because I was like, the impact's pretty quiet. It's not been turned down, but it's just pretty quiet. It's been it's got some fade out on it so that the tail's not so long, and the kick mostly just drowns it out, so they don't really clash as much as I expect them to. And so all in all, that's like this. So that's really just like a really reverby, like boom kind of thing, but it adds some nice sort of mid-end tail to the impact, which is nice. Then there's obviously there's the atmosphere as well, but there's also this. This is a reverse effect. So in Leviathan, the difference between a rising and a reverse effect is a rising goes up in pitch, like that, whereas a reverse stays at a single pitch, like that. So this is the one we've used here. It's this reverse D sharp 4. It's a really bassy, relative to the others, D sharp riser. I don't know if it's just in flat D sharp, like straight up D sharp, or if it's in D sharp minor. I haven't bothered to check, but I think it's minor. These two are pretty similar. There's probably some differences later. Anyway, so I took this reverse and then I reversed it. And used that as an impact. And because that's D sharp, which the atmosphere is also D sharp, but it's an octave lower than the atmosphere. Oops. And so they complement each other quite nicely. So with all that, it's like this. But it's missing some of that squishiness. So here is a riser that normally sounds like this. This is normally a 1 bar long riser. So I shortened it to like a beat and a half and turned it down. That's the entire riser, just shortened, just time stretched to be really short. And then the other thing is something that works really well when you're trying to make anything kind of glitchy or anything like that is, yeah, this glitch folder. Just there's a bunch of random glitch stuff. Most of it's like this, like aliens and robots, like it said, but there's also some just little effects like this. So the one I've used here is number 76, which sounds like this. It's just a really short kind of descending faller effects, like really short. But that adds a lot to the crunchiness to it. So then altogether that sounds like this. And that's the secret of the squishy drum. Obviously there's also the loop in here. So this, I took that loop I was talking about earlier with the reverse hi-hat and the aim and break beat, and I chopped it up in a way that the aim and break bit, this little, always lands on the 2nd and 7th beat. So you got the 3rd and 7th beat. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of each bar. It's a 7 beats a bar. It's 7/8. So I made it so that little aim and break thing always landed on the start of the 3rd and 7th beat, and then I just left in the little thing before it. So the groove you end up with is kind of like Now the reason that's where I chose to put those aim and break bits is because that's where the snares land in the actual drum loop. They're on the 3rd and 7th beat. So it was basically just layering, it was so that the little aim and break thing would layer with the snare, which works pretty well. So then you've just got this little intro, it's like 4 bars long. And again, there's another glitch effect here. This is 19. This has been stretched out a lot, so it's much longer and also pitched down. So the original sounds like this. Like that's the entire sample, and then I've stretched that and pitched it down, so it's like this. So it's about a bar long, a little bit over. And so I'm using that as kind of a riser to build into this weird little fill. Now originally this fill wasn't here, and it just went straight from the intro to this, I don't know what you call this, verse 1, I guess. But then I added this first half of the fill, and I was like, oh, let's do this, and it just kind of came to me, I guess. So the fill, let's talk about the fill. So the fill consists of 2 sections of 6 half-beat repeating hits, I guess, with a little half-beat fill after each one. So the first one is a really simple hit. It's this, which is the aim and break impact from the drum loop, pitched up a bit. So that's the pitched up one, and this is the normal one. As you can see, it's pitched up a bit. And then also the little half-beat crash from the kick over here. That sounds more like an open hi-hat. Use that as well. So just those 2 laid together. That's the first half, and obviously the kick's here as well. So that's just. Then there's a little half-bar fill, which I basically just grabbed. I grabbed the click and the little crunchy dirt sound from the kick, from the squishy drum. And then I added 2 random glitch effects that I found, this one, and this one. Hold on, I've cropped this one. So the full sample for this sounds like this, and then I just cropped it really short. As you can hear, that's got a lot of bass to it. It's kind of a neuro kind of Reese sound, whereas that's just it's kind of percussion really. And then yeah, there's the click, and there's the crunchy dirt thing. There's also a snare here. Yeah, and so the second half, the second hits are, again, it's the same crash, but this time it's the regular aim and break, not pitched up. Oh, and also the reverse crash things here, the reverse hi-hat thing from the drum loops here as well in the little fill. So this time the hit's like this, as opposed to this. You can hear the pitch difference, but there's also a chord in here as well. So this chord is really simple. I couldn't bother to make my own synth, so I grabbed a sustained synth sample from Leviathan. So these are all just long sustained notes in different synths, different notes. So like, and they're all pretty long. So I used C09, which is this one. That's the sample. I then tweaked this length knob down very low, so it's really short. Then, as you can hear, I low passed it with a focus on 800 Hz, distorted it using fastest, and then added this reverb that's really more ambience than actual reverb. Like the depth's really high and the mix isn't too low, but the decay is really low, so it feels more like ambience than actual reverb. And then that's just playing D sharp. That's that. Realistically, I should probably put a little bit of a high pass after the distortion, because there's some low noise there that's kind of ugly from the distortion, but whatever. So all in all, this fill sounds like this. A couple bits I didn't mention here. So this is the same glitch again from the first fill, but this time interrupted by a kick. There's this dirt crunchy sound again, but this time it's moved half a bar to the right. It's not in the fill, it's after the fill. The click's still there, and now there's this little thing. That's just a really short, loud, obnoxious little riser thing from the glitch folder again. And that's the fill. And then we come into what I guess I'll call verse 1. So the two new things, well, there's three new things in verse 1 here. Oh yeah, this is wrong as well. The three new things, the three new things, obviously there's the kick and snare. That's the groove. It's really simple. And obviously you bring the top loop in. So that's why the top loop's arranged the way it is. You've got a different part of the atmosphere this time, a louder part. So this is once it's built up a bit more, and that loops twice. And then obviously you've got the bell. This is in a D sharp minor key. It's playing like B, F sharp, A sharp, F, F sharp, D sharp. So that is a D minor, a D sharp minor. I mean, D sharp minor is literally D sharp, F sharp, A sharp. So you've got those three notes in there, but you've also got the F and the B, which fit in there as well. I couldn't recite the D sharp minor scale off the top of my head, but it works. And there's also this bass line. Now, to any of you who haven't seen Mick Gordon's GDC talk about the music of Doom, go watch it. It is, hands down, the best GDC talk ever. In it, he talks about how he made some of the weird basses from the Doom soundtrack. A lot of it comes down to just basically experimenting with crazy chains of guitar pedals and hardware effects. But something he mentioned early on is one of his first experiments was actually this really basic thing where he pretty much layered a sub, like a really deep sub, and a noise layer, and then distorted the whole thing. He actually did some like modulation with the noise, but I didn't bother doing that because it still works really well anyway. So that's what I did for this bass. So it's 3x oscillator, so I'm using a sine oscillator turned down all the way, and a noise oscillator. The pitch doesn't matter for the noise oscillator because it doesn't actually follow pitch at all because it's noise. The noise is really quiet though, as you can see it's only 5%. And then I've also shifted the whole thing down an octave. I've raised the root key an octave. So in case you're not familiar in FL Studio, you can right click keys like this to change the root key, the root note, and all the other keys are played in relation to that. So if the default root note is C5, if you up it to C6, you're effectively lowering the octave of lowering the pitch of the synth by an octave. And if you do it there, you're raising it by an octave. That only works for MIDI input. That essentially shifts the MIDI input before passing it to the VST or plugin. So really this is playing a D sharp 3, I guess. FX wise, we've got two different distortions. I'll talk about those in a minute. There's the low pass, which is what builds up. So as you can here's what it sounds like with no effects. So you've got the really deep sub and there's just that white noise on top of it. So you had the low pass that pretty much just gets rid of all the noise, and you're left with just a sub. Then we had, let's get rid of the low pass actually. We had a fastest, which already adds a lot of distortion, but most of that distortion is just on the noise, and it kind of feels a little hollow. It feels a little squarey, in my opinion. And that's just on the default settings. I'm not changing anything there. Then I did a wave shaper and just pulled this up to like this third from the top line, I guess. Just a tension, which really like emphasizes the buzz, because that's not distorting the original sound anymore. That's distorting the distorted sound. And then there's a low pass on it. And then this fruity limiter here, this is just for sidechain with the kick. It's the only thing the kick does. It sidechains with the bass. So this automation clip here is automating the low pass cutoff. So the low pass cutoff comes up, and then it's full here, and then it goes back down. This is effectively automating the distortion as well, because if you low pass, it's harder to hear the distortion when it's low pass, because it gets drowned out easier, and you just hear the sub. I might refer to this as the low pass automation a few times, as distortion automation a few times. Just remember, I'm actually referring to the low pass. So yeah, that's verse 1 pretty much. Again, we've got that reverse here again. But yeah, it just sounds like this. So the rhythm the bass lines are playing is it's these little groups of 2 notes. Each note's half a beat long, and there's a half a beat gap between them. And it plays 4 of those per bar, and then on every other bar it also plays this like 1 beat long note at the end. And that's pretty much the rhythm of the bass line. That's all there is to it. So nothing really happens throughout these what is it, 8 bars? Yeah, there's like 8 bars of verse 1 here. Nothing really happens other than the low pass slowly coming up on the bass, and then right as it reaches its maximum over here, there's suddenly another squishy drum that quickly transitions into a different section. So this little section here, this is just 4 bars. Essentially what happened here is the track modulated up to an F sharp minor rather than D sharp minor. That is a modulation because otherwise it would be an F sharp major if you were keeping in the D sharp key. But I tried that, it just didn't quite sound right. So there's 3 elements here, well, 4 elements. So you've got the squishy drum, which plays to transition into that, and then it plays here, it half plays here, it plays here, it half plays here, and then it plays here to transition out of it. So the reason it half plays at the end of every like 2 bars is because of this extra note. That extra note I was talking about, the 1 beat long note in the bass line at the end of every other bar, kind of conflicts with the squishiness a bit, like the pre-shift of the squishiness, these bits mostly. So I cut them out. So this one, obviously the bass line is now playing an F sharp rather than a D sharp, and also that final note goes up to a C sharp. And distortion's at max throughout this entire section. The bell is also modulated up to an F sharp minor. And the chords are back, playing an F sharp minor in the same rhythm as the bass line. And then, yeah, obviously there's the kicks and the crashes. And so the whole section just sounds like this. So then that brings us back into this section. So we modulated back down to D sharp minor, and now essentially what this is a build up. It feels more like a build down because the main thing that's happening throughout this section is the low pass on the bass is going back down and cutting off the bass until there's basically no bass right at the end here. But it is actually a build up. There are 2 noise rises here. Which stop a beat short for a good reason. Other than that, you've got the reverse here, and then you've got the atmosphere and the bell, and that's this entire section. And I'll talk about this bit in a second. So from here it goes like this. Now, I think I forgot to mention this at the start of the video, but this project is actually split into 2 FLPs. There's this one, which is Helios Intro, which is in 7/8, and then there's the other one, which is just Helios, which is in 4/4. So the idea is I render this down to a WAV, and then I import that into Helios, and then I build the drop in 4/4 afterwards. So after this point, the drop comes in at 4/4. It's a weird transition, and I was worried about how well it'd work, but because there's not much rhythmically going on here that forces you into that 7/8 feeling. There's no like drum loop or anything like that. It's not as jarring a transition as I thought it would be. There is actually another element to this build-up, but that's over in the other project, which we'll move over to in a minute. So I do want to talk about the drum loop fill real quick. I wanted to leave a single beat at the end of this build-up for a fill, and then go straight into the other drop. So I needed a good fill. It needed to be short, it needed to be fast, and it needed to be loud. It needed to be a bar long at 174 BPM, right? So I went through Splice, and I eventually found this drum loop, which is actually much longer. And I just took that last little bit. I just took just the last sort of 4 beats of that, I guess. And that's my drum fill. It's loud, it's obnoxious, it's noisy, it's messy. Feels like it probably wouldn't work, but it kind of does. It works. So yeah, that's the intro. That's all the crazy layering that's going on. Did I cover everything? Yeah. One last thing is I'm using Maximus for mastering. I'm super lazy when it comes to mastering. I don't actually master. I just throw Maximus on the master and use this preset. That's it. That is, technically speaking, from a technical skill standpoint, that is no better to just using a sound godizer. And actually, I mean, sound godizer is Maximus. These are the sound godizer presets over here. But yeah, I just use the clear master. Main thing is it makes everything louder, like a master should, but it also emphasizes the mids a little more than the highs, which is really noticeable in that little repeating fill over here, this bit. So if I turn the Maximus off halfway through that, you'll hear the difference. In fact, let me just loop this bit, and then just these two. So you can hear it's a lot sort of tinnier. The highs get accentuated more than the mids when Maximus is off. So Maximus basically just slams it all, makes it a lot louder, and helps accentuate the mids like that, which works really well. So yeah, that's the intro. Let's move over to... Oh yeah, I'll talk about sample choice real quick. So for the bell, the cowbell, I was like, well, I need a bell. It needs to be a short, plucky bell. Let's just go with the cowbell and add reverb to it. That was my entire thought process. For the atmosphere, it was the better of the two D atmospheres. There aren't any D sharp atmospheres. It was the better of the two D atmospheres, and I could just pitch it up a semitone. I didn't think to look at E atmosphere, so pitching down. I find pitching up tends to look better than pitching down anyway. What are the samples? The kick and snare, those are just, I just like them. They're just good neuro drums. Like I said, they're from this little drum loop here. Oops. And it just works. They're just solid drums. I don't need to do any messing around with them. I don't need to layer multiple snares and mix them awkwardly to get a good snare. They just work. So I use those. I use this drum loop partly because it's designed to go with those drums, and partly just because it's good for weird glitchy neuro. Like it's a weird glitchy drum loop, so it works for that kind of thing. But again, that was kind of a go-to thing. Let's see, this little pre-shift thing, like I said, this is from the other version of this drum loop, so it just kind of works there. This crunch thing, and you know what, like a dirt kind of crunchy sound. I almost ended up going with like a Windows XP delete file. It's actually quite similar to the Windows XP delete file. I have the Windows XP samples, where are they? Windows XP delete, or maybe recycle. Yeah, so there's the recycle sound. It's pretty similar. It's just a little, there's more highs, it's a little louder, it's faster. But you could probably get a similar result by taking the recycle sound, time stretching it to be shorter, and then using an EQ to push the highs up, or like a multi-band compressor to push the highs up. So I use that because I just wanted to add that kind of high-end crunch, kind of dirt sound to the impact, and that was just the first one that sounded right that I found in the short FX folder. The crashes, I use this one because it's not a very invasive crash. Like it's just a very vanilla crash, whereas some of the crashes are very invasive. Like that has a lot of weird tonality to it. So does that one, and I'm not a fan of those. They don't work well. I usually go with this one, but that's a really weak one. That doesn't work well with heavier tracks. That's more like a liquid thing. This one 22 is a little louder, and it's more high end, and it just works. And then 42, the one that I cut really short, as you can hear, that has a really sharp, like short impact at the start, like a really, not a transient, but like it's almost like a muted crash. It's like someone hit it and then immediately kind of partly muted it, and so that just worked for being shortened like that. The riser, I grabbed, it's literally the first, actually I don't think it is. I just grabbed a 140 BPM 1 bar riser. The reason I went with 140 BPM is because Leviathan has 3 tempos for risers, 110, 128, 140. I need to stretch it up, but I need to shorten it to make it faster. Either way, like even if I wasn't making it super short, so I usually go with 140. because it's already the fastest one. So it'll have less artifacting when making it faster. But I made it way faster anyway, so it was irrelevant. But it's just the first one I grabbed. The glitch stuff, I was looking for weird glitchy neuro samples and stuff, so I was just going through that glitch folder and picking out random ones. There's probably quite a few samples in this list of samples in the project that weren't used. And if I use the macro Persian used audio clips, I think I've already used it, but usually it gets rid of quite a lot of stuff, because I'll drag a sample in, I'll be like, this doesn't really work, and I'll delete it from the playlist, but I won't actually, like I'll delete it from the playlist like that, but I won't actually get rid of it from the project, and it'll just sit there, stagnating, waiting for me to Persian used. Same goes with this one. I kind of liked it. I feel like it ends too soon, which is why I stretched it out like that. I feel like it should have had more whoops to it, because those last two whoops have like no low pass on them, and I feel like it could have done with more of those getting louder or something, like the distortion going up, but it doesn't, so I just time stretch it to be long instead, and it works. This was it was the best, I think I talked about this when I was talking about the sample, but it was the best D sharp reverse that was bassy and not too like harmonic in the wrong way, like too major or anything like that. Yeah, so that's really the choice. So this distant impact is because I didn't want one that was too bassy. I wanted one with like a reverby tail. That's a really short kick with a nice reverby tail, so it worked. And then these are just noise risers. There's not much to them. This, I actually went through like 8 different drum loops trying to find one that worked, and this one just worked. It just felt right for what I was looking for. It wasn't exactly what I had in my head, but it was close enough that it still worked. So yeah, that's sample choice. So let's move over to the other project. No, I don't want to save it, I haven't changed anything. There's going to be a notice about Harmor. I'm not actually using Harmor in the project, it's just still there. Anyway, so as you can see, this is in 4/4, but there's the intro as just a WAV. Like I said, I did add some more to the build-up in this project. This is just so this is 2 hi-hat loops. There's this one, which is just like, it's like an 808 hi-hat or something. Like, it's such a basic like hi-hat, and it's just this is just a simple loop of that. Whereas this one is more of a it's like a pitch down hi-hat, and as you can see, it alternates between a quieter and louder one. I like that because it has that weird sort of almost garagey, neuro kind of weird pitch down formant sound. So I like that one. So I laid them together to get like just a louder sound, really. And then this one, and then the tempo sort of doubles here, and then right at the end there's a little. And also this pitch down hi-hat, the volume steadily going up on it. Like that. And that happens right before the drum fill. So that's happening during the actual build-up from the intro, so it's like this. Like that. Now it sounds pretty obvious there when you know what you're listening for, but if you listen from a couple bars earlier, it actually blends in pretty well at the start with the transient from the bell. Now, the drop, I'm not going to talk much about the drop, there's not much to talk about. It's the same kick and snare. I was originally going to go with a different rhythm, I was going to go with a different drop, which is why there's this here. Ignore it, it's bad chords and it's ugly. But I ended up going with this rhythm. I'm using this top loop, which is just, it's nice, it has like a, I guess a volume automated kind of glitchy hi-hats in between the drum beats, but on the drum beats it has this weird pan, like LFO pan ride impact. So I really like that, it just kind of works. It came from, what pack did it come from? Next Gen DB, yeah. The Next Gen DB, which is the same sample pack I got the drum fill from. The drum tools, drum loops. It's called Hero. So this is the full loop. I don't like that kick. It's what I call like a round kick. It's very subby, and it's not very punchy. I don't like it. Here's just a kick and snare. I'm also not a huge fan of that snare. It feels like it should have more tail, but doesn't. It's weird. There are 3 different top loops here. This one is the full top loop, but with also the snare. This is everything but the kick. This one is just the short hi-hats and the kick without the ride. The short hi-hats and the snare without the ride. Obviously, I didn't want either of those, so I went with this one that's... yeah. And then I use the same rhythm, but I like did it with my own drums. Now this little bass line here, this is totally work in progress. Everything about this drop is really work in progress, but this is the same bass from the intro, that really distorted one, but with a little fill thing at the end. And it's trying to follow the same rhythm of the little 2 half-beat things, but in 4/4 rather than 7/7, which means there's just an extra beat of gap in between the two sections. But it works pretty well, I guess. So yeah, and there's just a weird little pitch bend thing at the end. I can use slide notes because it's a 3x oscillator thing, so you just got like a... you've got a D sharp 4 that pitches up to a D sharp 5 very quickly, and then an F sharp 5 that pitches down to an F sharp 4 very slowly. It works, you know, it's not great, but it works. But in context, with the build-up, it works much better. So let's go from here. So that's the transition from 7/8 to 4/4. It's a weird transition, but it does kind of work. It's not as jarring as it seems, because the only real drums and rhythmic elements are the bells and these hi-hats, which they're rhythmic, but they don't care about the bars. They don't care about your time signature, they only care about the tempo, because that's just on every beat. There's no, you know, per bar repetition there, it's just every beat, which means it doesn't really matter. Technically the bell obviously is following a half bar progression, but it doesn't matter much, it's not that big a deal. It works fine anyway. So I think the transition is not as jarring as it seems like, as you'd expect for a time signature transition. But I think this drum fill really works as well. It fills that gap really well. I think it's maybe a little loud. I might turn it down a little, but I just think it fills that gap really well, and yeah, it works pretty well. So that's Helios. That's the entire track. That's everything there is to know. I hope anyone watching this found it helpful, because this is my second take, because my screen recorder didn't want to record FL Studio's audio the first time, so I'm recording FL Studio's audio with Audacity, and I'm going to layer it in after, so if the music audio is a little out of sync, you know why. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I might do this with other tracks if people are actually interested, because I have a few other tracks that I'd like to do this with that are a bit more complete than this one. I like nerding out about the way I've done things and the way other people have done things, so I'm totally down to do more of these if people actually find them useful. So yeah, that's Helios.